All right.
Hello. Welcome to the Punk Rock Libertarians Podcast, episode number 475. I'm Otto. Tonight I'm joined with Victor Charlie.
Good to see you guys. Glad to be here.
And there's the voluntarist, James Babb.
Hello.
And special guest, Mr. Kyle Anzalone.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on, guys.
Oh, thanks for joining us, man. It's like when you slum it up with us, man, we really appreciate it. Usually we're just talking about ridiculous things, so we're going to talk about some serious things, like the serious anniversary of the awful insurrection that happened.
Yeah, where were you guys?
I mean, hold on, I'm holding back my tears, man.
It's tough. We
I'm
almost
so
lost
upset.
our democracy.
Our democracy, man.
We almost lost it.
It was this close. Oh.
So close.
And we should mention that Kyle is with the Libertarian Institute, of course. So,
And antiwar.com.
and antiwar.com. So we got some credentials in the house this time. It's not just our uninformed opinions. We actually have somebody that's done research and reads stuff. So
We
Thanks
actually
for
have a
coming.
journalist here,
Yeah.
somewhat credible than us
See,
just
we get
making wild
plausible
assertions.
We
Yeah,
get
we're
plausible
all-
deniability because technically we're just, I wouldn't even use the word comedian, but we're just attempted comedians, right? So
Yeah.
we don't actually have to be accurate.
No, usually, and I mean, I'd say we're good. Like over 50%, we're accurate in some of the.
We're better than
assertions we
mainstream
make.
media, of course,
Oh,
right?
of
You know,
course. Right, clearly. So,
Yeah.
and you guys see the. Oh man, I wish I had. Oh, we're sorry, guys. We were dealing with so many. I don't even say so many. Just one technical issue before the show. I forgot to get the links in, man. I'm sorry. Of course, this is the reputable podcast. And Kyle even asked, like, how long you guys been a podcast for? This is why we don't succeed, because
you'd think they'd be more professional by now. Yeah.
But I was
Yeah,
wondering if you guys, Alex, I guess if you could look it up and find.
Oh, yeah.
What was the? I forget who it was. There's one of the corporate press anchors was started crying.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Here we
we was
go.
like,
So this
thank you
was
for it.
I think it's the
I like
MSNBC guy, right?
Yeah,
K-part. Yeah.
this is
Oh, it
why
was
we're all-
touching. It was touching.
It was. And give me a second here, but so where were you guys on January 6th? Where were you on that day of infamy that, is
I
equivalent-
watched it. I watched it happen. Like I was on
You
Twitter
were there?
all day.
Oh, okay.
I was on Twitter all day, so I gotta see all the live feeds, all the different angles of all this happening. And I gotta say, when I watched it, a lot of it reminded me more of a Black Lives Matter protest from 2020 than a coup d'etat.
So
And a big part of the
mostly
reason
people that
why
were fiery.
is the police were obviously instigating the crowd the entire time and doing the same stupid stuff they were doing all summer to the BLM protesters, like firing tear gas into the middle of the crowd. So everybody from the middle forward has to push forward to try to get away from the tear gas. And then when the crowd surges up into the police lines, they start beating the hell out of the people in the very front, and it escalates this huge conflict. Right. And
The
there's a
system
lot of
works.
very stupid people in the Capitol. Like, it's a bad idea to kick and break your way into the US Capitol building, right? Like, you should not do that. It's not a
Well,
good way
unless
to
you've
protest.
got proper backup. Okay. Let's just
But-
say
Yeah.
wasn't the team that was going to get away with that, right?
Right. But exactly. Like, it went exactly what you thought. I've never seen a coup where one person gets shot and everybody goes home for dinner. Right. Like, that's not how coup d'etats work.
No.
And that's essentially what happened. That thing was over by like 3 or 4 o'clock that day. I think by 5 o'clock, everybody was out of the Capitol. Right. And it was like, it
They
felt
still
like,
held a
at least
session.
watching
Didn't
it.
they hold?
like-
They actually held a session that night. So it
Right.
wasn't like, yeah.
Right. The building wasn't even destroyed. The people stayed within the velvet
The
ropes.
sacred hall of democracy.
Pelosi's
It's
office-
Sacred.
Her desk
Yeah.
got
Nancy
farted
Pelosi's
on. Okay?
office was destroyed, but that's the punishment for being the evil witch. Is
Oh,
that,
but no, this-
people
this
toss
is
your
defiling-
office.
Speaking of defiling the halls of Congress, wasn't there another recent scandal involving
Yeah, there
some,
was some.
some senators or
Yeah, if only they had gone into the Senate chambers and had a giant orgy with each other, they probably would have gotten away with the thing.
I
But
was like, even that's not half as bad as the shit that they do there when everyone's dressed up and
Where
Right.
how come people didn't feel like that was a threat to their democracy? You know, and are there sacred halls?
well, and then the congressman being afraid on one sits and cowering and things like that. How many people around the world have actually been victims of the bombs that were sent by our congressman? But how many people have just had to cower in fear? Like they had to experience one day of being afraid for their lives. Maybe think about how everybody else in the Middle East feels now every day because of you people. Like in that way, maybe the congressman could just like taken it as an experience that being afraid for your life is really scary and it really sucks, and maybe you don't want to do that to other people all the time.
But the thing to learn that lesson, they would have actually had to been scared for their lives and not just pretending for the media. Okay.
Oh, I think
I
some of
doubt
them were scared for their
I doubt.
lives. They're really
I don't
stupid.
think so. Really?
Oh, they're really dumb. Yeah. No, I think a lot of them were scared. Like, I think a certain congresswoman who was crying on her live feed again was and is legitimately scared, not of the actual events, but her warped perception of them.
But are you talking about AOC? Wasn't she
Yeah.
like in a completely different room and stuff
she wasn't even
anyway?
there.
Like she wasn't anywhere like near the insurrection, right? Like
I know a large part of her story was I heard somebody coming down the hallway and I was scared for my life, and it turned out to be a police officer checking on me. So I do
Yeah.
remember her story being very empty. And that's a lot of what happened that day. Again, kicking down and breaking into the Capitol building was a terrible idea of the Trump protesters.
a lot of people
especially
got
when
just got let in though. A lot of people were just like,
Right.
oh, this is the tour
Come
group
right
that
in.
I signed up for. You know,
right.
it's
And
like, here you go.
that's a nonviolent protest, right? Walking into a building is a nonviolent protest, and so
Especially
none of
when
those
the
people should be-
when the cops are opening the doors for you, answering your questions, showing
Yeah.
you where
Let's-
people's
mhm.
offices
Let's,
are.
I think
let's
this
take a
is
quick
but
listen on this.
the mainstream
This is
media.
our-
This is how they wanted you to make you
Yeah.
feel.
Let's-
They wanted to stir up these
Tell 'em.
I'm going
emotions
to try to
again.
get through this.
We're gonna just try.
Thank you for what you did
no.
3 years ago today.
Was
Please
he the one that
tell
shot
me
Ashley
your
Babbitt?
thoughts on this third anniversary.
No, that was a black guy. His name.
Is that Ray Epps? Who's that?
We are still in the midst of the same fight that began
Michael Fano.
on January 6th, 2021. And we have a lot at stake in this country. And I think that it deserves every American's attention.
Yeah.
We got to stop Trump.
Not that guy.
We got to stop Trump.
Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah.
So
Pathetic.
another thing on 1-6, I don't know if you remember this, but the day after 1-6, a police officer died, and they started claiming that the protesters killed him. This guy's name
Yep.
was Brian Sitnick. And I knew it the second that was reported that wasn't true, because the day before, the police union had said that it wasn't related to what happened on 1-6. And when has a police union ever downplayed an injury to a police officer unless it truly was unrelated, which even members of his family have come out and said that he had a stroke. And so,
Yeah.
that
It's vaccine
that's just
related.
ridiculous. But that was, a
Climate
very
change.
big lie they
Climate change
told.
finally caught up with him.
But that was a very big lie they told to warp the narrative of 1-6. Now, if you were downplaying it, you were downplaying the death of a police officer, and aren't you just the worst person in the world for doing that? When that never happened. The people who died on 1-6 were a bunch of Trump protesters who had heart attacks. I think one person tased themselves and ended up dying of like a stroke or a heart attack, and of course Ashley Babbitt, who was killed by the Capitol police officer or
Straight
somebody
murder.
in the Capitol. I don't know if it was Capitol.
Who generated the story about the cop getting beat to death with a fire extinguisher? Like that was a real specific narrative that got put. I bet you could find like 5 out of 10 people believe that's true today.
Oh, I'm sure. Just like Russia, broke into the voting machines and changed the numbers to give the election to Donald Trump. There's still probably a good number of
That's true.
Democrats who would believe
there
that.
was the Russian the collusion problem. Yeah.
Here we
Yeah, dude, like it had all the hallmarks of disinformation, Russian disinformation.
This one, this is what really happened. Oh, sorry guys, I'm booming it.
Yeah.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the US Capitol building. If you joined us today for the insurrection, please make sure you pick up a promotional leaflet on the way in, stay inside the safety cordons at all times, and if you get lost, speak to one of our Capitol Police officers. They'll be sure to point you in the right direction.
Everyone's walking around taking pictures.
Staying in the ropes.
Staying to the ropes.
Set aside a little time today to join us for some insurrection activities, including our photography tour, our fancy dress competition, and have a go on our climbing wall.
Climbing wall. The Wilhelm scream. That's great.
And I've now received the results of our fancy dress competition. The winner today is Jacob Chansley. That's Mr. Jacob Chansley.
Look at him
If you
walking
report to
around.
your nearest Capitol Police officer, they'll be sure to give you your prize, a guided tour.
Turns out he dresses like that normally.
The police are
heard
right
that's like
behind him. They're
part of his
walking
thing.
him through. They're literally guiding him.
They're
Yeah,
taking selfies with him.
For all you people listening, this is just footage of the
day. We
day.
hope you enjoyed the insurrection. Wherever possible, please try to clean up after yourselves. Don't forget to visit the souvenir shop on the way out, and feel free to join us on the outdoor terrace for Nancy Pelosi's Insurrection Soiree. Grab yourself a light refreshment and enjoy the music of our very own fancy dress competition winner.
Where's the MAGA meme-all? Like what's
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Right. It's just insane. And they're still doing time. Like there's people still waiting trial.
They're still rounding
waiting trial.
people up.
Yeah,
They're still
a
pretending
list.
like they're arresting insurrectionists, like they're Recep Erdogan or something. 4 years after the coup, still rounding people up. It's crazy.
Do you want to play any video of that Biden speech where he was bragging about like locking people up for 800 years over this? Did you see this demented speech that I guess he thought this was like everyone's going to think he's great. But it was some of the creepiest genocide Joe I've seen in a while.
He's very dark and very authoritarian.
900 of them
Did you guys hear it?
have been convicted or pled guilty. Collectively to date, they have been sentenced to more than 840 years in prison.
Clapping at
Well,
that.
here's a guy that knows how to send people to prison. I
What's
don't
Trump
think
done?
anybody's going to deny that he's an
Instead of
expert.
calling them criminals, he's called these insurrectionists patriots. They're patriots. And he promised to pardon them if he returns to office. Trump said that there was a lot of love on January the 6th.
At least in the Senate room, there was. Yeah.
The rest of the nation, including law enforcement, saw a lot of hate and violence.
Oh my God.
One Capitol Police officer called it a medieval battle. That same officer was called vile racist names. He said he was more afraid.
What is medieval fight? What were they pouring like hot molten like lava on people like as they were coming?
Right.
Through
They all had two-handed swords and horses and crossbows.
Yeah.
And people take this guy seriously. Like they take the whole narrative seriously. I just don't know how you can watch him like, oh wow, that was like a bad riot at some point, and then it was just an awful like trespassing.
Yeah. To Kyle's
I think
point,
there's still most people believe it.
And to Kyle's point, it was a total fucking setup. The same people that are buying the narrative of January 6th are the same people that were out mostly peaceful protests of burning down after the George Floyd Summer of Love, right? And then they're the same ones that witnessed the escalation of force that the police often use, where they're, tear gas and rubber bullets and crowd control techniques that actually instigate the riots and instigate or turn peaceful protest into actual violence. And it's like they don't even understand. They can't put two and two together and see like, oh, well, that was totally peaceful. Those protests were totally peaceful. But then looking at January 6th, and they can't even like think like maybe this was possibly a setup, an entrapment, and the police. And there's video of it. It's just fucking pathetic. These people are so fucking dumb that
and all the
buying this
testimony
narrative.
and all the
Right.
testimony. I mean, it looks like there weren't just inside there weren't just a few plant cops in the group. I think there may have been hundreds of cops.
Yeah, they said like
from
up to
all these
200.
different federal agencies. It wasn't just Ray Epps. It was just the whole thing was filled with them, like a Gretchen Whitmer assassination plot. You know,
Right.
like it was about that credible.
And think about what, even a couple dozen people could do to a mob in order to, stoke people to like, engage in this mob mentality kind of rioting that we did see at the Capitol. So when you're talking about hundreds, imagine two things. One, if they really wanted to, they probably could have very easily de-escalated the situation, ask the informants to back off and try to cool people off. That probably would have, helped to ease the mob. But, the other way, if you have 200 people in the crowd who feel like, they kind of have immunity, right? They're working for the feds and their goal is to kind of stoke and continue on. And again, unlike the rest of the people in the mob, they're not so concerned about getting hit by the feds. Maybe one of them starts punching the glass outside the Capitol building and that encourages everybody to start, that's one person who moves a barrier and then, you get that mob mentality going. So when you had that many feds, again, even if it was just a couple dozen, but if you're talking really about hundreds, it could really change the dynamics of, what that mob is doing. And it could turn, a very rowdy protest into a riot very easily.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at some of the, a lot of them had Antifa ties or arrested at protest the year prior during the Summer of Love, and then they just showed up and like, wait a minute, I've seen mugshots of these individuals at like Antifa protest, right? And then you see them rocking like a Trump hat, or like Ray Epps to this day. It's like, who the fuck's Ray Epps? Like all that video footage of him instigating and telling people to go in and guiding them up to the gates, and then all those individuals nothing. They're just walking scot-free. Meanwhile, there's people still out here, like you said, Kyle, still being pursued by the FBI, still getting knocks at their doors, visits at their work, like at their workplaces, or it's pathetic. Like I think I've met quite a few people. I mean, Otto and myself, we're in Maryland. Babs is up in the Philadelphia area, but being so close to DC, I know a lot of people that were there, maybe outside, that got knocks on the doors from the FBI. Or inquiries from them, like, is this you? We see Facebook posts of you at January 6th. Regardless, just because they were there, they're getting visits by the FBI. I mean, we saw billboards in this area in the DMV, like DC, Maryland, Virginia, like with wanted signs for individuals just that happen to be there.
Well, one of the disturbing things was how much the FBI pursuit that the mainstream media really was engaged in. Look, they outed Jad Teixeira, the Discord leaker, the alleged Discord leaker as well. It was, I believe, the New York Times who outed him to the authorities before even telling the people who he was. So, it's really, or maybe they actually published it and that's how the FBI found out. But either way, the mainstream media, I remember USA Today was really campaigning and trying to round up all these people and identify all these people and asking the public for tips. And
everyone was
really
like,
disappointing.
It became a super snitch on your neighbor event,
or your family,
uncle,
your parents.
Yeah,
they try to make heroes out of kids who tattled on their parents and things like that, like really dystopian kind of stuff.
Yeah, they had to pivot from like snitching on your neighbor for not complying with the COVID's regime to, oh, you were at Jan 6. Like they had to continue that snitching on your neighbor, and it's pathetic.
I mean, haven't there been people that have been convicted that weren't even there? That were but still somehow just instigators because they made a post somewhere, or like, it's really shocking how far that they've drifted from, what were, what would have been considered, some limits or things that, they do this kind of stuff, but they'd have to be quiet about it or they'd have to deny it. And now like everything's just so blatant. They don't even try to cover it up. It's, we'll just gaslight people, on our controlled media channels and then just assume it'll all work out.
I mean, I really wish I had, kept a better track of like all the different lawsuits and who they've come down on. Cause I know, there's people who were basically just walking around in the Capitol who really didn't do anything. And, maybe you call them trespassers or something like that, but really maybe, they're really just protesters, who have been sentenced to federal jail time. And that's, really messed up. But I do know, I think it's Viva Frey. Is that the lawyer guy who moved to Florida with the big hair? He's, I think, done a pretty good job of keeping up on all this. And whenever I look at that, that's kind of who I look at to have a pretty good take on, how wrong all of this is happening and how, the treatment that these people are getting. Cause, a lot of these people are put in solitary confinement and stuff like that. Too. I mean, that's, even if the Democrat narrative is right, and this was an insurrection, you're really not supposed to come down on your political opponents by throwing them in solitary confinement for years. I mean, that's considered torture. That's pretty messed up.
I just saw a headline this is from the New York Post. This is from September 19th of 23. FBI lost count of how many paid informants were at Capitol on January 6th and later performed audit to figure out exact number, ex official. So the FBI was being grilled by lawmakers evidently, and they said they lost track of. They couldn't even calculate how many branches were involved, how many.
I bet that's a lie. They just don't want to admit how high that number is. That's all that says, is that the number's a lot higher than they want to admit. Because if it was like 5, they would just they figure it out pretty quick and tell them. But it was high enough that they decided it was better to stop counting. Which, that's just some government trickery right there.
Exactly. And there have been some that were counted, where they're, I guess, due to they found out that like Proud Boys had like 8 informants just in their Proud Boys, and like each of these other groups had other informants just that had infiltrated those groups, like the 3%ers, or I forget who the other organizer groups were, Oath Keepers, right? Like all of these organizations all showed up with their own entourage of feds, like completely briefed on what was happening through those groups, completely knew everything that was going on.
Just like the Whitmer kidnapping plot. And the day after that happened on my show, I said, I bet half of the people involved here are feds, are informants.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe that turned out to be right. There was like 25 people involved and a dozen of them were feds.
They were like almost all feds. Weren't they like all feds?
About half. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's a significant portion. Again, think about how that changes the dynamics in the room, right? Like if you and your buddies are talking about doing something stupid and half of the people in the room know there's no consequences for them doing something stupid, and in fact will make money convincing you to do something stupid, you run away with ideas and you end up, with even not serious plot. It's not like they did anything really getting close to kidnapping the governor of Michigan, but they got closer than they ever would have because there were a bunch of people getting paid to, convince them to think about doing this.
Maybe we should think about brainstorm ways in advance to deal with these situations when they come up again. Like when I was thinking, like maybe play along until they give you a bunch of weapons and explosives, and then turn the tables or report them to the FBI, or what I mean, but somehow get all those weapons, but not do the crimes that they're trying to talk you into.
One thing to add, the reason that I thought it was so obvious, now only the Whitmer plot, but and again, especially when it comes to 1-6, I think there's a lot of organic energy there. There's a lot of people who are very upset about how that election went. And a couple months after the election, Time Magazine published this article about how an elite cabal influenced the 2020 election and how the social media algorithms worked and how they covered up the Hunter Biden laptop story and all that. And so, there was a lot of reason for people to be very upset about how that election went. And so, there's a lot of natural energy behind it. But the reason that, it's so easy to spot these Fed schemes is because for years they were doing it to Arab and Muslim young men in America. And so whenever they happen now, they're kind of easy to spot because we have dozens, if not hundreds of examples of them doing it since 9/11.
Yeah.
Over and over and over and over and over again.
Rinse and repeat.
Yep.
Oh man, yeah, it's not gonna stop either. Like this isn't gonna be the last time any of this stuff keeps going on, and that's the sad.
And that's why if you're a libertarian listening to this and anybody slides into those DMs and starts talking about any kind of violence, that person is probably a Fed, and you should definitely block them. And if not,
but before you do, please refer them to our Fed level Patreon, where where people can subscribe, and then we talk about any kind of like illegal activities we have planned. So
perfect.
this is
1,000. We're still waiting on $1,000.
Yeah.
Just one Fed level donor of $1,000 a month. And, when we record the after hours after this, episode, we'll tell you all the juicy deets.
I'll sing like a stool pigeon.
It could be, who knows what you could learn. It might be about, like 3D printing guns. It could be It could be about cryptocurrency.
It's my news.
It could be. You know what? We might discuss plans to purchase raw milk. You never know what heinous.
Now you're just a terrorist.
We might cross lines and go up to Amish country and get raw milk. We might commit felonies of going up to Amish country and purchasing raw milk. You never know.
Does anyone? I caught a small glimpse of that, but did you guys hear about that story? I mean, clearly,
so I have it here in the let me remove this one story and let me pull it up here. But this is a Amish farmer in Bird in Hand, PA. Great little town. But
sounds like a place you go to all the time, Alex.
Bird in Hand.
I once played a basketball game there.
No, but this is kind of a little bit of a journey from Babs, but this is Lancaster County. Here's the report. But his farm was raided by the Amish farmer was raided by the Pennsylvania State Police.
Evidently, this guy is not the compliant
farm operation here in Birmingham, Pennsylvania. There are currently 2 marked state trooper vehicles here, 3 other official use vehicles. I attempted to enter the building. Inside, a state trooper turned me away and said that they are executing a search warrant on Amos Miller's operations here. I have not been able to make contact with Amos Miller yet, but once again, Amos Miller's property here in Bird in Hand, Pennsylvania, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Law enforcement is once again harassing Amos Miller for serving his neighbors. And here we have a search warrant being executed, not allowing media to enter the building. Stay tuned for this is a developing story. We will have updates as we have a search warrant being executed on Amos Miller's property right now as I speak.
I'm here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, looking inside the window into Amos Miller's farm.
Thank God they're keeping us safe.
Here.
Oh my God.
We have multiple state troopers inside. We have coolers there on the ground that have been filled with products from Amos Miller's operation.
Possibly raw milk.
Multiple people in there.
For
They've been inside Amos Miller's building here for hours, not allowing media in, searching the premises. I was told by one of the troopers that they are executing a search warrant. When I was instructed that I cannot be inside. Again, if you follow Amos Miller in the past, you know that he's a local farmer here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, who provides organic products to his private buying club. People voluntarily choose to buy from him. I actually just spoke with a customer who came several hours today to purchase products. He's been a customer for 20 years, never been sick.
That's the gist.
Never gotten sick, I should say, from Amos Miller's products. And here you have these 2 men coming over, pointing to these coolers. Again, these coolers have at least been partially filled with products from Amos Miller's store. It looks like they will be hauled off. You have these tyrants coming in and searching. And here's the problem with, you have these state troopers and these other, I'm assuming they work for the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. These people are at the heart of our tyranny problem in
I
America.
first heard about this thing was an issue when Ron Paul I think it was during the debates or something. Like he was talking about raw milk, and I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean you can't drink raw milk? Like what? I remember that vividly, being like, what the fuck? Like that was one of my my moments, or just I remember like it.
Well, my understanding is, all the raw milk products I've seen for sale say for animal use, or like not for like human consumption, like it's pet food, right? It's how they label it as like a workaround, and everybody just kind of winks and laughs and be like, "Ha ha, isn't that stupid?" Right? But I'm not sure what Amos Miller was doing that was different. Like he might have just been like, I'm not pretending, I'm not fucking around, I'm just doing it. And
there's just probably some government official somewhere that decided they don't like the way this guy sells raw milk, and that their gift to humanity will be ending this particular sale of raw milk. Meanwhile, nobody in the federal government cares that doors are flying off of Boeing planes. They're a significant military contractor and several senators. It's not like
wait a minute, are you
so basically he was served a warrant by the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, mainly because he's in the crosshairs of repeated failures to comply with federal farming regulations. The USDA has tried to bring Miller's farm into compliance with federal regulations, but Amos has yet to cooperate with the feds and faces fines and jail time.
I think he's like extra stubborn, even for Amish.
Yeah. The PA Department of Agriculture is conducting a search warrant. Troopers from Lancaster are just assisting with the scene security. Anyways, but it's probably, who the fuck knows? You get the USDA involved. This is just...
Well, I mean, we all know that the the United States federal government is deeply concerned about our health.
Oh, 100%.
And they're constantly doing things to just keep us healthy and to make sure that, we've got all the jabs we need and
making sure the pizza is on the food pyramid. Pizza is a vegetable, and what was it, the food pyramid?
I was like, wait a minute, you're talking about pizza and hot dogs here. I don't see dog whistling to our certain island folk,
But it's also they're also concerned about the health of people around the world, evidently. Like sharing depleted uranium. Like some key nutrients that they might not be getting in their diet.
Yeah, it's disgusting. The fact that they probably had the one customer, he said 25 years buying raw milk from this farm, and the fact that the federal government wants to get involved, it's just disgusting. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about driving, like the part of, I mean, we're south of the Amish country, but that's like, all the fruits, vegetables, all cheese, meats, just at your disposal, the self-sufficiency of the Amish, and then that it's like available to us. And they're just trying to stop that. They're trying to stop, where who's providing your food. They're just looking out for the big corporate farmers that just get these giant subsidies, and that's it. They don't care about the little guy doing it right, and they want to end it. This is all part of the UN Agenda 2030 and all this, trying to force us to eat the fucking bugs. That's what they're trying to do.
Pizza is the eye of the Illuminati food pyramid.
There you go.
Thank you, Andrew.
You got Bill Gates buying up farmland, right? Yep. You got him releasing genetically modified mosquitoes in the wild. They're certainly concentrating into bigger and bigger farms. We've seen what they've done in other countries like Netherlands and Sri Lanka that are trying to implement these World Economic Forum strategies, right, that have just been devastating to farmers. They waged a war across Ukraine and Russia, which was like the breadbasket of Europe. It's like they're really it really seems like they're trying to attack the food supply. Remember when we used to have food plants blowing up every week? Was that a conspiracy, or were food plants really just do they really just blow up all the time and that's normal? I don't know.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a depopulation agenda afoot. I don't know. I don't know.
It's hard to deny it, right? It's like, it sounds crazy. Like when you be like, yeah, there's a bunch of billionaires about to have another meeting in Davos or whatnot, and they think there's just too many of you. You know,
too many of us worthless eaters out here. Just it's.
But so the Amish are definitely sort of like a leak in their control structure. Like if they want to control all food, it might be so they can make sure it has the right drugs and vaccines in the food, right? Or where they shut down supply lines, they want to make sure it's shut down. So if they want to squeeze you, you don't have a place to go buy food, right? Like when they tell you to start starving. Amish are like, to me, like they're like a resource here in Pennsylvania. I feel like if shit goes bad, like there could be another lockdown. They might not even know for a long time out there.
Yeah, they don't have TVs. They don't have the internet.
Yeah,
they're like, what?
Like they're just going to keep producing food no matter what shit the federal government throws at them. And Amos Miller's a good example. He's like, yeah, they're trying to, stop me from making food, but I'm still doing it. I think there's probably others who have gone on to farming something else. They get that kind of pressure and like, okay, I'll raise chickens instead. I'll do, like they're farmers. They can do anything.
Yeah, it's so definitely supply chains. And this might be a transition into foreign policy, but with Kyle, maybe this is your realm. With the Suez Canal being shut down and the whole what's going on in the Red Sea and supply chains, are you noticing this as well, like or a potential with what's going on in the Middle East right now?
Yeah, I mean, so a major shipping company said that it's a Danish shipping company, said they are not going to be sending cargo through the Red Sea for the foreseeable future. And apparently this adds about 10 days to cargo ship transit. And at least the U.S. government claims it's going to increase the cost of food and clothes in the United States by a little bit of money. I'm not so sure what the impacts are going to be on the U.S. economy and things like that. It does seem like it would impact the European economies quite a bit, not being able to ship things, say, from Asia, China, Southeast Asia into Europe through the Suez Canal and having to go all the way around Africa. Certainly going to add some time and expense to those trips. But the U.S. here, their solution, of course, is to force the Houthis to allow the cargo ships to go through the Red Sea, and has no desire to apply any pressure on Israel to end its campaign in Gaza and relieve the situation that way. From the perspective of the Houthis, I mean, in Yemen, I think they're going to see this as a huge victory. This is a group that for 8 years, since 2015, as long as you guys have been on the air, the Houthis have ruled Yemen, 80% of the population in the north of that
they're
country
just rebels,
from the
though.
capital city. But still, everywhere you go, they're just called rebels.
Yeah, but
They've been starved. Huge swaths of the population have been starved. They've been subject to indiscriminate bombing campaigns. 400,000 people, as a conservative estimate, have been killed in the 8-year Saudi war on Yemen. The Houthis withstood but got zero international recognition. A group of Yemenis that was for a long time led by Mansour Hadi, who was elected in a one-man election that was organized by Hillary Clinton in 2012. Was recognized as the international leader of Yemen, even though he lived outside the country in Saudi Arabia the whole time. And only recently did they appoint this like new Southern presidential council that has absolutely no legitimacy in the country either. But now the Houthis have picked a fight, and they say it's on behalf of the Palestinians in Israel. So it means that if any country now goes and attacks the Houthis, they're going to war with the Houthis on behalf of Israel. And the Saudis are pushing through a peace deal with the Houthis right now after 8-9 years of conflict. They're finally going through and doing that. And I think the Houthis finally won themselves the regional legitimacy that they fought so hard for. And look, the U.S. really doesn't have an option here. We've seen that the Houthis are willing to fight a very brutal campaign, or to withstand and hold out in a very brutal campaign. The U.S. and UK aren't going to invest what the Saudis did in a massive bombing campaign. In the Houthis have figured out how to withstand that. So and they've been under some of the most serious sanctions as anywhere in the world. It's been like North Korea in Yemen trying to get aid into that country for most of the past 8-9 years now. So I think this is what the Houthis see as their ultimate fight for legitimacy, at least among the other nations in the Arab world. And I think they're going to win it. And they're going to claim it's on behalf of the Palestinians. And I guess in at least some respect it is. There seems to be a lot of solidarity between the Yemeni people and the people of Gaza. But I think, the Houthis probably see this as, a pretty important bid for their own movement as well.
Kyle, maybe have you heard this theory and that Egypt just recently joined the BRICS nations? Could this be like geopolitical reasons for like basically that we want to reroute the shipping out of the Suez Canal because there's, I guess, that cripples the Egyptian government. This is all, basically world reserve currency wars.
I'm sure this is an issue for Egypt, having the Suez Canal shut down. Another and probably much larger problem that Egypt will face is that the Palestinians pushed, or that the Israelis pushed the 2 million Palestinians that live in Gaza into the Sinai, because then those people will then be in Egyptian territory, and the Egyptian government will have, this massive group of people that just suffered an unbelievable trauma, now pushed out with absolutely nothing. So the Egypt will have to build and maintain tent cities. It'll be a humanitarian nightmare for decades, if not generations to come. It'll be a large population that'll probably eventually be absorbed into Israel, but will have aspirations outside of what the the Egyptian people typically want. And so it's going to be a major problem for the Egyptians. So I'm not, maybe the Egyptian government is willing to suffer a few months hit to their Suez Canal transit fees and stuff like that in order for the Houthis to help bring an expedited end to the war in Gaza before the Egyptians get straddled with all the Palestinians there.
Yeah, because I think I saw today. I don't know if you mentioned, but like Chad is saying they're willing to take in refugees, but it's like
Congo. I heard Congo.
Yeah. There's 3 countries that have been mentioned in Israeli media. There's this Israeli outlet, Zeman something. It's I believe the Times of Israel's Hebrew outlet. But what they have reported a couple times here is, one, the Israelis were looking to basically bribe the Congo into taking the Palestinians, and then yesterday there was a report that both Chad and Rwanda had agreed to take tens of thousands of Palestinians each, and then the Israelis would, I guess, offer a token amount of money to these countries and to the Palestinians for going.
Totally not genocide at all, right? Like, has nothing to do with ethnic cleansing, right? Like, totally not ethnic cleansing, right?
I mean, this is the definition of ethnic cleansing, what Israel is doing in Gaza. And, it certainly meets the international definition of genocide. I think, anytime people say the word genocide, they assume it has to mean the Holocaust, which was, putting to death 6 million Jews. And so anything short of killing millions of people just isn't a genocide. And that's not, what the word genocide actually means. It means depopulating people with violence, really. And that is certainly what the Israelis are doing in Gaza. They're thinning the population.
And a destruction of the culture by just scattering the people, and to, efforts to make sure that languages and religions are banned, or even kids are taken from parents, so they're not raised in the native religions, and but so I mean, imagine me like, hey, sorry, we bombed your civilization, back to the Stone Age, since you don't have a place to live, oh, look how generous we are. We're going to send you to the Congo, like
right.
Right, a place with rampant ethnic violence already. I'm sure that a few hundreds of thousands of Palestinians showing up isn't going to create some rivalries and tensions and issues in the long run. And it's probably going to be, just another addition to the permanent state of violence that's, plagued the Congo for, I guess, decades now. Although I'm not familiar with all the conflicts in the history of that country.
I mean, is it by the time Israel's done in Gaza, right, there's just going to be nowhere for these people to live anyway, right? There's just going to be rubble. right? So
Yeah, no,
and then they'll say, well, you have to go somewhere, you know, and then they'll just bulldoze it and build new Israeli like settlements, right?
Yeah, no, it seems to me
property.
that with the damage that Israel's already done to the infrastructure in Gaza, if they say just, you know, really continue to restrict aid to a couple hundred trucks going into Gaza a day and don't allow concrete and other rebuilding, you know, infrastructure to enter Gaza, there's no way that place in the conditions. And they're talking about like over half of the buildings in all of Gaza having taken some sort of damage now, and like 70 something percent of schools, well over 2/3 of hospitals, the UN shelters there. This was a month ago when there was only, I think, 900,000 people at the UN shelters. I think that number is well over 1 million now. They were saying there was only one bathroom for every 150 people and one shower per every 750 people.
Wow.
The large area that
It's worse than Pork Fest.
yeah. There's a large area along the Mediterranean Sea that's, you know, there's no infrastructure there. It's just, you know, an empty land, and they're forcing all the Palestinians there, but there's no bathrooms. Everybody's just living in tents, and it's, you know, winter-ish conditions right now. So it's raining, it's cold right now in Gaza. There's sewage backing up everywhere, diseases spreading around.
It sounds more and more like Pork Fest now that you mentioned it. Not to make light of the situation. I don't mean to make jokes about this tragedy, but
we've made fun of worse.
Right. No. I understand. A little gallows humor helps the situation some. Swallow the pill so I could talk more to the audience about how horrible the situation is in Gaza.
So I know we talked about what's going on in Gaza, but I don't know. The LP Georgia made a post that said Israel's an apartheid state, and it got some pushback even by people in our own circles. Like, a lot of people are saying it's not an apartheid state. Like, there's plenty of Muslim citizens there, and what about the Jewish citizens of other Muslim countries, and how is it not the same there? I just, it's so frustrating because, like, I for me, like, as someone like, it clicks to me. It's like, yeah, like, I'm sure Jewish citizens are probably treated like shit in other countries if they're even allowed to.
it's collectivism. It's collectivism in the brain, and it clogs your thought process, and they can't come up with a rational perspective while they're stuck in this paradigm of collectivism of Jews and Muslims and states.
And just
all
imagine
bullshit.
thinking that, you know, it you know, say like during Jim Crow or something, the US was pointing towards I guess, you know, finding some African country where the black people suppress the white people and saying, yeah, we treat our blacks bad here, but look at how they treat their white people in Africa, you know, chasing them around and killing them. That completely justify that, you know, that actually makes the opposite point that you're trying to make, right? You're kind of admitting that Israel is committing humanitarian crimes against the Palestinians by saying, oh, look how bad at least Jews are treated in countries where I perceive they're treated bad. Like that, it's just a really stupid, that would point at least is a stupid argument to make. So I guess the simple kind of perspective here is, you know, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the Office of the UN, some schools in Harvard have named Israel an apartheid state. And look, those are all pretty establishment organizations, and Israel is a part of the US empire. And so, you know, I find those to be more admissions than actual, like, you know, propaganda against Israel. But, you know, let's say you don't believe me. You know, get into a little bit more detail. When you talk about Israel, right, there's different regions where the Palestinians are treated drastically differently. So there's Palestinians that make up about 20% of the Israeli population, and these aren't people who live in the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. These, you know, the people that live in Israel proper. And, you know, these Palestinians are treated fairly poorly, but they can go out and vote. They do have members of the Knesset who represent them in the Israeli legislature, although there is a strict tradition in Israel not to let any Arab members of the Knesset become ministers in the Israeli government. So essentially, they're always, you know, in Israel, there is a majority party and an opposition, and then the Arab kind of coalition within the Knesset. And most of the time, the other two groups would rather not form a majority coalition than include the Arabs in their coalition, right? So,
Yeah.
yes, they are kind of involved in the government, but the Israelis work very hard to make sure they're excluded. The Israelis have a specific Jewish nation state law declaring that Israel is, the land for the Jewish people. And so the Palestinians who live in Israel are certainly second class citizens, and I don't want to minimize the suffering presented to them. I'm sure, look, if any libertarian lived like a Palestinian that lived in Israel proper, at least the things they say they would do to resist the US government, they would certainly be resisting the Israeli government if they were a Palestinian living in Israel. However, I don't know if that actually raises to apartheid, but where it certainly does is the West Bank, where you have settler only roads. Palestinian children to go to school often have to cross multiple checkpoints operated by Israeli soldiers. Palestinian children are shot and killed by Israeli soldiers for things like throwing rocks at Israeli troops. They conduct midnight raids to round up kids as young as 8-9-year-olds from their bedrooms in the West Bank. Hundreds of kids are in Palestinian kids are in Israeli courts in the West Bank where they use the Hebrew language. And so it's, conducted outside a language that these children even know. Most Palestinian children have spent some time in an Israeli prison, are detained by Israeli soldiers. Right now, you have mainstream, again, international aid groups like Doctors Without Borders documenting cases in the West Bank of just rampant violence by either the Israeli military or just Israeli citizens who live out in the West Bank, either beating up Palestinians who try to go out and pick their olives during harvest season, or cutting down, setting fire to the trees, destroying Palestinian farmland. And so, in the West Bank, I think is really when people say Israel is an apartheid state, they're talking about the treatment of the millions of Palestinians that live in the West Bank. The situation for the Palestinians in Gaza before October 7th was far worse than even that. They were just trapped in there. A few thousand got to leave every day, do some work in Israel, made some income. But there was rampant unemployment, like 50% unemployment, barely enough food and water to drink for most people. And, the restrictions are at the place of the Israeli government. They, don't let hardly any aid get into Gaza. The fishermen can only go fish a couple miles off the coast. And I mean, we could just talk about restriction after restriction, but in 2018, the Palestinians that lived in Gaza organized a peaceful march. They called it the March of Return and attempted to march to the fence that separates Gaza from southern Israel. And the Israeli snipers opened fire and killed women, children, paraplegics, medics. They shot a medic in the back. Journalists, people marked in press fest. Medics in white gowns with I think they have red crescents. I don't think they have like crosses on them like in the West. They have like the crescent moons and things like that. And just killed people indiscriminately and fired tear gas to push the peaceful Palestinians back there. And so when you talk about Israel's apartheid state, people like to try to cherry pick the small kind of percentage of Palestinians that live in Israel proper to say, oh, it's not an apartheid state, when the majority of Palestinians live in far worse conditions than those.
Well, isn't it? I mean, it's supposed to be a Jewish state. It's therefore, by definition, going to exclude non-Jews. All right, well, non-Jews will have different rights. I mean, it's hard to like. It's like their main slogan.
Law. You're citing Israeli law there. That's just so people understand, because I think people think, oh, this is just anti-prop. No, they have a Jewish nation state law on the books. You could look it up and read about
it. And wasn't it sort of this ratio of 20%, allowing a 20% non-Jew established generations ago as like a target they decided could be allowed and tolerated within the Israel?
I certainly remember that as something some early Zionists said. I don't know who that was and if that was somebody who ultimately, because some of these statements are made by people who end up becoming prime minister of Israel or something, and so that may have become official policy. It also just may have been a number of Zionists throughout there, but I'm pretty sure I do remember Daryl Cooper, Martyr Made, bringing that up in his fantastic 26-hour podcast series, Fear and Loathing in New Jerusalem, I believe. Really, I mean, if you want a good background on this, I mean, if you're a reader, you want to read a book, check out Coming to Palestine. It's a Libertarian Institute book published by Sheldon Richman. If you're somebody that's a podcast listener, check out the Daryl Cooper Martyr Made series, Fear and Loathing in New Jerusalem. It's absolutely excellent. Listen to the first one on normal speed, then after that you could do 1.5 or however fast you listen to podcasts. But he's a little bit I don't want to say theatrical, but he puts a lot of work into reading his quotes, so they have a little bit of emotion and feeling. And I think it helps to understand some of the feelings going on. So I recommend, at least on the first one, listen to it in regular speed and everything to get all those dynamics.
Isn't there also a law like Jews can't marry Muslims in Israel?
I don't know that. I
can't
do
marry
know
non-Jews.
I know that even Palestinians that say if a Palestinian lives in East Jerusalem, another Palestinian lives in the West Bank or East Jerusalem and Israel proper, then they have trouble marrying and getting the permission to live in the same community. And that's just an example of how much Israel restricts the freedom of movement within even all the territory that's occupied by Israeli forces, where Israel has the monopoly on violence.
Right, but no, they won't recognize your a marriage between a Jew and a non-Jew. They do not want to. This is part of their we're a Jewish state, and we're going to keep making sure you're having Jewish babies only.
I'm not 100% sure on that. I just want to look and double check before I commented.
That's why I was I heard.
I'm not saying that you're wrong. I don't know
I don't.
when I haven't heard that, but just because I haven't heard it doesn't mean it's not true. And certainly something you hear things about Israel becoming, passing a Jewish nation state law, and the first time you blink at that too, and you say, no, that's not right. And then you look at Israeli media, and they're all saying, oh yeah, this is great, we're passing a Jewish nation state law, and you're like, oh
right,
this is happening.
Dude, that's just.
And also forget about being gay and getting married in Israel too. You're forget about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Dude, it's weird, man. It's you hear. I understand how you hear all that, and it to be it's true. You can look this stuff up. It's like you said. It's not stuff that's just oh, you got to dig, and this was someone's. They wrote in a diary that this is how they really feel. No, you can go and they say it themselves. They pass it. You see it with your own eyes. You see dead babies just constant. I can't turn on Twitter and not see dead children. Are arms of little kids hanging out of crushed rubble, and and then there's pictures of before and after, you have Gaza towns that you see that are just right along the coast, and it's just now just flat. It's just completely flat with nothing there. It's just ready to build. They get all the demo work, now they're ready to build and put their new homes on the corpses of these dead Palestinian people. I don't know how people can see that and just not be there's clearly a bad guy in here. Okay, what they did was messed up on October 7th, but history didn't start on October 7th. There was a before and there's an after, and it's just been the Palestinians.
And even if history did start on October 7th, at some point, there has to be some kind of line that you will not cross, right? If Israel says we are going to kill all 2.3 million Palestinians, are you people should be against that, right? Just because October 7th happened, that doesn't justify that. And okay, they're not going that far, but they are going pretty far down that line. I mean, one of the hospitals in northern Gaza, some UN, I think it was World Health Organization staffers went to it, and they said that basically the hospital is destroyed. They're not accepting patients. Israel arrested most of the doctors, so there's 1 or 2 doctors on staff, a few other nurses that are basically just Palestinians who happen to be willing to volunteer and have no real medical experience whatsoever. The staff say they can't even walk around the hospital because there's injured people in every bed, completely covering the floor, and they're all laying there missing arms, legs, broken arms, legs. They said that, you know, there's people that, you know, in like the old cartoons where you have one broken arm and one broken leg and you're laying in the hospital bed, both suspended and everything. There's people like that, and they're just laying there begging for water because there is no water. All these people are dehydrating to death. And I mean, like, this level of cruelty. There was another time where I really thought that this was Palestinian, like, call it Hamas propaganda or whatever you want. They claimed that there were babies left on premature babies left on a bed to decompose for weeks by the Israeli forces. And so, just so people understand, this is what happens. The Israelis tell the Palestinians that they have to evacuate a hospital, right? But you can't walk out with more than you could carry. And so to transport a premature baby in a certain case, you can't just carry that baby out of the hospital, right? You'll kill the baby doing so. It has to be transported in a certain kind of like incubator bed and all this. And the Israeli forces say you can't do that. And so the medical staff say, fine, we're going to leave these babies, but you have to go get them. And weeks later, they showed up and the babies had died and were just decomposing, where the Israeli forces, you know, forced the hospital staff to leave them. And again, initially I thought there's no way that this could possibly be true. There's no way that people operate with this level of cruelty. And then it's confirmed by
video
news. You know what I mean? And it's just
like so sad.
I've seen the video and I
comprehend it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard about medical relief shipments where they go in and take out the anesthetic and just to, you know, like.
So I heard that today on Matt's Blumenthal, said to Aramate. I've been looking for the citation just for myself to have it. But I do know that Israel is really restricting the aid that gets into Gaza. Senator Chris Van Hollen, I think that might be one of your senators, right?
Yeah.
Wait, we can't afford a senator around here. Who do you think we are?
not to say anything nice about the guy, but the guy did say some truth about the matter, that the Israeli inspection regime for allowing aid into Gaza is the most restrictive that international aid agencies have faced. And he says that they find even one item that they don't like on a truck, they'll reject the whole truck and send it around. And, you know, even international, like the international community, countries like France have protested how Israel is restricting aid going into Gaza. There's a lot of countries that really aren't happy about, because they're the ones trying to finance the aid going into Gaza, and Israel is restricting it and setting up this onerous inspections, compliance system.
Wow, that's rough, man. And I'm glad you're here to kind of talk, because this is all stuff that we see, and it's just like hearing, like, you just, like I said, you hear people even in our movement say like, oh, that's just propaganda, or oh, well, what about this blah 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 blah. So it's like, it's good to get like a perspective. I always love listening to you and everyone else at the Institute. So we're kind of running up on it right now. We're gonna go probably head over to the After Hours podcast. You cool to hang out with us for a little bit longer?
Yeah. Just let me, one more thing real quick. So
sure.
I know that there's a lot of hatred that exists between the Israel and Palestinians, and that's a long hatred. And the reason that I take the position that I take is because if my government was arming Hamas, then I have a big problem with what Hamas, is doing and has done and everything. But the U.S. is arming Israel, and really bad, since supports Israel, allow Israel to do everything it's doing.
And Israel's also the one that's arming Hamas, right? So is that
I mean,
right?
For a long time, Netanyahu's policy has been to prop up and support Hamas, because Netanyahu sees Hamas as the golden ticket to not having to negotiate on two-state solution. So long as Hamas exists as controlling the Gaza Strip, then how can we allow this terrorist state to form? And so we can't negotiate with the Palestinians whatsoever. So, the real issue and the real reason that Americans need to intervene here is because the level of support that the U.S. gives Israel allows Israel to do what it's doing in Gaza. And, we should, as libertarians, at least, we should hold the position that if the U.S. was backing Hamas in the way it backs Israel, we would oppose that too. And there's also, the facts on the ground that if one side, even if both sides wanted to carry out a genocide, one is capable and the other isn't. right? Like, one side has all the military power in this conflict, and the other side has homemade rockets and rifles, right? And so, on those grounds, the fear shouldn't be that the Palestinians are going to commit genocide against the Israelis, is that the Israelis have the motive and the capability to commit genocide against the Israelis, and with the U.S. backing, they get the international cover and the weapon supply they need to make that happen. And so we are seeing that unfold right now in Gaza.
Nice. Thanks, man. Well, dude, tell everyone where they can find you if they don't know.
Yeah, so I write for the Libertarian Institute and antiwar.com all day, every day. I'm covering the foreign policy stuff, not just Israel. I spend a lot of time covering the situation in Korea. There's a lot going on there. For years I covered the war in Ukraine, or the war in Yemen and Afghanistan. So this has been a long time covering U.S. foreign policy and interventions around the world. I'm the opinion editor at antiwar.com. I co-host Conflicts of Interest with Connor Freeman. And if you like my appearance here, I will be on Judge Napolitano's show, Judging Freedom, this Thursday at 2:00 Eastern time.
Nice.
If he wants you to shovel snow, say no.
I knew you were going to say it. All right. Well, dude, thanks for coming on. And we're going to hop on over to our After Hours podcast right after this. We record that. If you guys go to patreon.com/punkrockliberatorians, you get to see all the tiers and stuff. But as I think the lowest tier is $3. That's it. It's only $3. You get the every month, every week you get a new exclusive podcast. We're gonna send you a direct link, YouTube link, so you can comment while we record live. And if not, you can always catch it on your podcatcher later. But yeah, PRL. What is that? Patreon.com/punkrockliberatorians. And there's other ways to donate to the show if you go to prlfans.com, and you guys can find our links for Bitcoin and our PayPal and stuff like that. And we also have t-shirts for sale over at libertariancountry.com. If you use the code PRL or PRL Podcast, you get a 10% discount. If you spend $50 or more, you'll get a 20% discount with the code PRL2. So until next time, everybody, live free
or die.